everybody. Welcome to the, April 17th, 2024 meeting of the Quincy Planning Board. At the beginning, we'll do a roll call. Allie?
Sally Shaughnessy present.
John Kelly present.
Larry Luzo present.
Kim Beelan present.
Chris Mead present.
PJ Foley present.
Great. And so if you're watching at home, if you're here, you'll see that we have a new member, Chris Mead, who is Richie Mead, who was the longtime chair of the planning board and member of the Quincy Planning Department, his son. So we're very excited to have Chris joining the board.
Yes,
Thank you very
welcome.
much.
Yes, very excited. So first order of business is to vote on the minutes of the March 20th planning board meeting. There's a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. There's one item on our agenda tonight. It's a continued public hearing for 10 Independence Ave. That's planning board case number 2024-01. We did receive a request for continuance, and I know Attorney Foley's here as well.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Patrick Foley, business address 265 Willard Street, Quincy. Chris, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Your dad was a great guy, and we know you'll do a great job. Just looking for a continuance until 1 month. We're still working on some plans, work with our architect, our engineer, just to button up a few things with this. So if we could just extend it out a month, it'd be much appreciated.
Okay, great. And that's the May 15th meeting?
May
Is that-
15th.
Okay. All right, great. So is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous. Thank you. So with that, we're moving down to our business items. There were a couple of A&R plans for endorsement, and then a presentation on the city's ongoing open space and recreation plan update.
You are a very speedy group. Okay, thank you. I'm just starting a stopwatch so I don't carry on for too long. Through the chair, members of the planning board, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Adrienne Lennon. I'm a senior scientist with VSC Group. We are supporting the update of your open space and recreation plan, and part of that exercise is to come and communicate with you the features of the plan that we want to make sure you're aware of, gather some feedback from you, and make sure that you understand that the plan will come before you in 60 to 90 days time to review and endorse before we return it back to the state. So tonight's presentation will be an introduction to the open space and recreation plan and the planning process, some discussion of open space and land use trends, and then some of the prominent parks and open spaces in Quincy that we're looking at as part of action items in the goals and objectives portion of the plan. Then we'll talk about the next steps. Beyond that, we have an ongoing virtual open house. We have produced a survey for the entire city of Quincy. It has been translated into traditional Chinese, simplified Chinese, and Vietnamese in addition to English. That will be posted on the Natural Resources website for wide distribution. It's ready to go now, and we're hoping to have it up as soon as possible. We'll be circulating it to you. Please do also circulate it to your network so we can gather as much data as possible before we really wrap up the process. So, what is open space? Why complete an open space and recreation plan? What's involved in the planning process? Where do we look at existing conditions for the open space? When will it be complete is a big open question, right, these days. And how does Quincy Open Space and Recreation align with other city and state initiatives? So open space refers to conservation land, forested land, recreation land, agricultural land, corridor parks, amenities such as small parks and green buffers. It's also public landings, public access points to the water, beaches, and any other naturalized areas that you think of inside of your community. Oftentimes, we will also gather information about vacant land, whether or not it is identified as parkland or potential parkland, because of the acquisition opportunities that may be there for things like pocket parks and other community amenities that wouldn't necessarily be captured in other planning processes. So open space can refer to the vacant and undeveloped lands with potential and also existing lands. So your parklands, your trail systems, and it includes not only city-owned properties, it also includes properties that are held by nonprofits, by the state, and by the federal government. So we capture all of those open space parcels and their uses and think about how Quincy either relates to them or has the opportunity to manage and operate them. So something that's important to understand is that simply owning open space, parks, or recreation land is not actually necessarily going to cause them to be protected. So there are separate levels of protection for open spaces. You can have a permanent deed restriction, like a title restriction on conservation land. You can also enjoy what's called Article 97 protection, which is a statute of the Commonwealth that essentially assigns limited protection to open space wherein Commonwealth funds have been invested. It's also possible to assign Article 97 protection to a parcel by legislative act for your municipal government. And then there's also entirely unprotected land, and maybe there may be a memorandum of understanding for school property or something like that that prevents it from being very easily sold for development or something, but it's not necessarily a deed restriction or any limited protection that would be assigned under the assessor's database. So those levels of protection can also command the uses of those lands, right? So conservation land, especially if it's being conserved only for passive recreation purposes or for conserved land itself, prohibits the opportunity to even put in something like a bathhouse or a landing or other facility, even a small footprint facility, just because of the deed restriction and the way that that's written. There is some flexibility sometimes in Article 97 land. For example, recreational fields, athletic fields can be shifted in their uses sometimes, but that now always does require a one-for-one replacement. So if, for example, you are going to go from a rectangle field to 2 diamond fields, you have to find another home for that rectangle field that you were replacing. This becomes a little bit tricky when we have things like tennis courts and a pickleball interest, because essentially it's a similar court use, but you have to think about how you're going to be displacing tennis court users and if potentially you need to create a court somewhere. So it becomes a little bit of a game of Monopoly, a little puzzle of all of your assets that you have to sort of look at and think about what you can release and what you can't when you're moving things around and really planning for the future. So why are parks important? Of course, there are the natural resource values of parks, which include habitat for wildlife, improving air quality, providing flood protection, and capturing and cleaning stormwater for your environment and your naturalized areas. And then also for the social and economic benefits, promoting healthy lifestyles, increasing access to healthy food, and stabilizing neighborhoods, because everybody wants to live near some kind of park and open space area. Types of recreation are classified in 2 different arenas, as I had mentioned before. The first is your passive recreation, which are things like walking, hiking, fishing, low impact kind of activities. And then you have your higher impact active recreation activities, which really involve the installation of facilities, the maintenance of facilities. So those are swimming pools and athletic fields and playgrounds and things of that nature. Public landings where you may have a marina, dock, pier, float infrastructure, something like that, that needs its own investment planning to be maintained. So why complete an open space and recreation plan? It's a tremendous opportunity and effort to catalog and understand what exactly you have for community assets on your public lands. And it's good for 7 years with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. By having an open space and recreation plan approved and in place, the City of Quincy has the opportunity to apply for certain grant programs through the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs that otherwise would not be available to them. In addition to that, when you have included action items and objectives inside of your plan, you can reference them easily for other grant programs that don't necessarily require an active existing open space and recreation plan, but will strengthen your grant application, and that's for things like municipal vulnerability preparedness and other state-funded opportunities where they want to see that there is already a community effort in place towards certain action items if they're going to fund the process. So Open Space and Recreation Plan also encourages community protection and stewardship of the vital resources. As you can see, there's the Open Space and Recreation Planners Workbook was actually first drafted under the Patrick administration, Duval-Patrick administration. It has recently been updated but not yet promulgated. And it does require a certain level of community engagement, which is part of the reason why I'm here tonight, is because you want to actually go out in the community and understand how the community is using their public facilities and their land every 5 to 7 years or so, because trends change, of course, and also because you want to make sure that you're reflecting the interests and needs of your community when you're planning forward and developing your action items. So who's on the team? Most of the group is here tonight, so it's the City of Quincy staff. We have Rob, Joe, and Joanna, which I'm sure you all know very well. And then in addition to that, the group is supported by the Natural Resources and Parks Department, Dave Murphy and Heather Litz. So it's been a really great group of people representing Quincy and the interests on both sides, planning and community economic development portion, and then also natural resources, talking about, how do we center public land and land use for the future for Quincy so that we are representing not only the changing community, but also what the real needs are going forward, and especially in the face of climate resilience and Quincy's needs for climate resilience. With BSC Group, Jeff Vassar is the Vice President of Planning and Landscape Architecture, is the project manager. Heather Gould started this project, and then myself, Adrienne Lennon took it over, and then we have support from a senior GIS analyst, George Andrews, who's wonderful, and of course, you. The planning process began in 2018. That was at the time of the last Open Space and Recreation Plan update timeline completion. And the effort then was to produce a new Open Space and Recreation Plan for the years 2019 to 2026. And so that process underwent similar public forum events, similar community engagement, similar mapping exercise, and at the time we were working with 2019 data around the assessors and census information, and used that to submit our draft to the Massachusetts Department of Conservation Services inside of Executive Office of Energy and Environment for their feedback. And that's part of the planning process. You have to submit a draft to them, and they typically come back with certain comments that they want to see a little bit more information on, or they want to see it calculated a little bit differently, as they have themselves, as I mentioned, been updating their workbook. So from 2019, we got this comment back from Division of Conservation Services. It was a really strong draft that went in, so the comment letter that came back didn't have a lot of new information that was requested of it. However, as soon as that did happen, we had to all shut down for the COVID pandemic. And of course, I'm sure you all know that really brought a halt to planning processes that were not absolutely fundamental and required for development in the city, and this is true in every municipality. Finding space and time under the conditions of a pandemic to try to do these sort of extra exercises and also coordinate so many different city departments was too challenging. So in about a year ago, we took it up again, deciding this was a good opportunity to review the draft and figure out what we needed to do to try to move forward with the process and make sure we have an active plan in place that is approved and finalized with the Division of Conservation Services. And that's where we are here and now. And part of that has included updating some maps. Of course, in the interim, an entirely new census came out, and we have to update according to that census data what we're reflecting in terms of population trends and race and ethnicity and housing trends. And some of that is captured, as Joe and I were talking the other day about, in the housing production plan. So it's not really new information necessarily to Quincy, but it's new to the discussion inside of the Open Space and Recreation Plan. And then in addition to that, as part of, I know the Executive Office's tremendous focus on public lands and open space and recreation, there was the creation of the Natural Resources Department, and not only the creation of it, but also the funding of it by way of understand to be a $25 million capital improvement plan. And those monies were immediately dispensed into the community because there was such a tremendous need of so many new users and different user types during the pandemic of open spaces. And I think everybody felt that pressure. I know in Quincy, some of the larger and more well-known open spaces are actually DCR properties or Commonwealth properties, but that really didn't change the impact or the influence that that had on Quincy Public Works and other departments in terms of operating and maintaining those places. And then, facilities that had a lifespan of 5 to 7 years suddenly had a lifespan of 2 to 3 years because they were seeing so much use. And so many people needed to be outside because that was really how culturally we were able to relieve ourselves, right? So right now we're doing this audit, this accounting of what changed, what were these investments that we made that were actually in this initial draft plan by way of that capital improvement plan, and then what were some of the things that we just had to do because there was a demand at that time. And we want to make sure that we are getting credit for that too inside of this plan and saying, we did some really good things in Quincy in terms of land acquisition, facilities improvements, and opportunities to connect communities that weren't necessarily in the original draft because we didn't actually see the need for it at that time. So there's this necessity as a mother of invention kind of piece that we want to make sure that we're rolling in and communicating in the plan when it goes back to the state because it's really important work. So now here we are in the spring, beginning the final sort of stages before approval, and that is going to be taking place today, the presentation to the planning board and the launching of the Open Space and Recreation Plan survey. The survey essentially shows the entire index of properties and work that we have done and asks the public and the community to rank some of those things in terms of what they value the most so that there's still an opportunity to direct a little bit what the action items of the plan are. And then we're really taking it on the road. The Parks and Recreation Commission has the mandate of executing the plan, and so they need to actually host a public forum where I'll give a presentation very similar to this one and introduce the Open Space Recreation Plan survey again, hopefully to a wider audience to make sure that more people are aware that we're doing this work and that we're looking for a little bit of feedback before we close it all up and send it back off to the state. And after that survey is closed, I'll come back, present a second forum to the Open Space and Recreation, to the Parks and Recreation Commission, showing the results, right? So that everybody has clear and transparent understanding of what the data showed, what people really reflected as what they valued and what was important to them, not only in the action items, but also in places and activities that they wanted to see investment in. And we'll tidy that right up and send that back to Division of Conservation Services, hopefully for approval. There are a couple of steps in between there in June wherein you'll receive that finalized plan and we'll be looking for an endorsement of the planning board. The City Council will receive the finalized plan and we'll be looking for an endorsement of the City Council. And then also the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission receives a copy of the plan and we look for an endorsement from them. So. Last summer, in an effort to make sure we were capturing all of this information, we interviewed the various cities departments that are impacted by open space maintenance and improvements. And we had this great roundtable discussion with members of public safety, police, fire, EMS, public works, the public health department, and then natural resources and planning members were also there to talk about these exact kind of issues that came up during the pandemic of use and new uses or unexpected uses or areas where there are uses where we don't necessarily want to see use and need to kind of direct a change in those management recommendations or places where we need to really just protect for climate resilience and reduce the use altogether so that we're protecting, for example, neighborhoods and things like that that are not necessarily open space related, but they're infrastructure of the municipality that is going to be damaged over time if we don't start kind of facing those matters now. And now, on the other side of the road show, of course, is Planning Board, Conservation Commission, Parks and Recs, and communicating with city councilors. So we've had the opportunity to do what we called an in-service with the municipal staff, and we've had an opportunity, and now we have the opportunity to come out to the public and communicate with all of you, boards, commissions, and committee members. We know how important your work is and how much institutional knowledge you bring to the table. I'm myself a former conservation commissioner and city councilor in my municipality, and this sort of information is really critical in planning processes to have individuals who have that much background and understanding of what's going on and what are the trends in the community that have a more global view than just specifically the plan. So we want to make sure we're gathering your input and really hearing from you what you think. So one of the features of open space and recreation plans is a whole series of maps that are produced first to identify open space. And I should say before I start with these, we take these maps out of your most recent assessor's database. So there's a pretty specific methodology that is used to isolate and identify specific parcels, parcel types based on their ownership or their level of protection or their size. And then you make a series of maps that identify, where are those open space areas, what type of open space are they? Are they identified for passive or active recreation? That's not always in the assessor's database, but sometimes it is, and that's really helpful to know. What level of protection does it enjoy? Is it a conservation restriction? Is it a deed restriction? Is it an Article 97? Or is it generally held for municipal purposes? Is it in school? Something like that. So here's a good look of existing open space in Quincy. You can see Blue Hills, and a lot of your waterfront actually is considered open space. And then in your downtown areas, you do have some existing municipal land that's not necessarily protected, but maybe held and used as parkland right now. So when you're looking at these maps and you have an opportunity to think about planning, you can say to yourself, where could we invest CPA funds, for example, or where could we invest municipal vulnerability preparedness capital action grant projects in these open spaces to build resilience and also build value in those open spaces. And that's kind of where you begin, is with ownership and level of protection. In addition to that, you have to always look at your water resources, especially in a coastal community like Quincy, where you have such a strong relationship with the water. Not only do you have a large watershed, but also multiple bodies of waterways traveling through the municipality, and the whole community faces the ocean. And with sea level rise and climate change, the impact of those oceanfront properties is going to become very, very dramatic, especially between 2030 and 2050. So planning now for what's coming is the best. It's all we can do. It's really the best we can do right now. So having these resources available to you and incorporating them in your plans and your planning process is truly critical to being able to actually act on them before you're acted upon. In addition, we like to always look at soils. The Division of Conservation Services has a tremendous focus on soils, actually, and land use and land protection for soils. They have some pretty large programs for protecting agricultural land and identifying high-quality soil locations in municipalities everywhere. Farms and forests are really critically important to the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. So not only are we looking at soils where there may have been urban fill or changes of soil composition due to historic industrial uses or construction uses, we're also looking at, where were the places where there were historically farms. And even in a place like Quincy, you had significant open farmland only 50 years ago, and so there are places where there may be opportunities to really consider soil value as part of natural resource value on a particular parcel. Finally, we look at zoning. Actually, I think I might have one more up after this, but zoning, of course, dictates so much of what we're able to do in a municipality. We always like to make sure we're viewing that through the lens of open space and recreation, so we incorporate that in there because zoning is evolving rapidly in planning in the Commonwealth, as we're all very aware, and oftentimes making sure that you're considering your overlay districts as part of open space and recreation planning can give you the opportunity to say, well, there's going to be significant development pressure on a particular location that actually has an opportunity to be a pocket park or a green quarter or something like that. And you have to act then to do the protecting, because the market will drive overlay district development, of course. Okay, that was the last one. So environmental justice is a new and very, very high level focus of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and also the governor, especially now. And what we're really aiming to try to do is deliver the message of meet people where they are. And so not only do you need to understand who's there and where they are located to really execute environmental justice and bring environmental equity to a community, but you also have to have a plan going forward for reaching out and communicating with those individuals every single time you plan to take action in an open space or recreation area. So here, we're understanding based on census tract that there are language isolated people in the community, and we understand what their language isolations are. And so as part of the planning process, we're beginning here and now with working with translation and hopefully interpretive services for the public forum, so that we know for sure no one is excluded. Everyone has the opportunity to attend and meaningfully participate in this planning process, because public lands are for everyone. So finally, as we're wrapping up the entire update process, we, in sections 7, 8, and 9 of an open space and recreation plan, the workbook asks you to come up with goals, objectives, and actions. And so oftentimes, and this is equally true in this case, you'll sort of roll forward and build upon goals of past plans. The open space and recreation plan in Quincy has been in place for many cycles now. So there are pretty well honed and defined objectives and goals for the municipality. And so in this particular case, because natural resources has been split off and shifted a little bit since the last plan was published, we wanted to recognize that in our goals and objectives process, so that they have an opportunity to really contribute to executing some of these action items. So I haven't included the action items up there because I think that would just crush you. But I do want to, I'll give you sort of a sample of it. In goal 1, to maintain and upgrade parks in a way that balances cost effectiveness with high quality design and best management practices. Objective 1.1 is to implement park improvements contained in the 2017 Park Improvement Bond. And then I have in front of me the list of action items that are connected to that. So I'll just share this first objective with you. The first action is to continue to implement the master plan for Marymount Park, including enhancing the existing trail system and creating new trails that link existing public and open spaces. The second is to renovate Kincaid Park to include a splash pad, basketball courts, and a more extensive path system. The next action is to construct the city's first dog park off of Quarry Street. The action after that is to install new turf surface at Veterans Memorial Stadium. The next action is to create new basketball courts at Beechwood Knoll School, Welcome Young Park, LeBrec Field, Wallaston School, and the Broadmeadow School. Thank you for correcting me. The next action is to replace the tennis courts at Russell Park, Bishop Field, Welcome Young Park, and the Broadmeadow School. The next action is to construct a new field house at the city's track facility inside Faxon Field. And then the final one is to create a new Pony League baseball field with restrooms at Four River Field. So you understand, in the action items, you're really identifying the places. You're really drilling down to what are the parcels that we are going to actually do these actions upon. And obviously it's too much information to try to put on a series of slides, but when you do get this plan and have the opportunity to review it, really hopefully you're going to see some of the things that you really care about in there, because we are trying to capture everything as much as we can. So just going through the additional goals. Goal 2 is to encourage safe public access to waterfront areas and water-based recreational activities. Goal 3 is to expand recreational opportunities to reflect Quincy's cultural diversity, community interests, and the needs of underserved populations. Goal 4 is to identify additional funding sources for open and recreational spaces. Goal 5 is to manage open space and natural resources to support Quincy's sustainability and resilience to climate change. Goal 6 is to make open and recreational spaces available to people with disabilities and older people. And goal 7 is to treat open spaces as an experiential classroom to promote environmental stewardship. So that's a lot. It's a lot to try to do. It's a lot of objectives and a lot of action items inside of those objectives. And because the plan has been in draft for so long, we've actually completed a lot of those tasks. So we're kind of identifying not only what initially we had dreamed of in 2018 and 2019, but we're also kind of expanding it forward a little bit to say, now this is what we're going to try to do next. So it's a really great opportunity to look through what the vision is for usership and for the community going forward, and also understand that there may be opportunities when you reopen this package again to expand on other goals and objectives. So that's something you can always be thinking about with open space and recreation planning, because there's always a next one. The Quincy Open Space and Recreation Plan is made to matrix with the hazard mitigation plan, which I know you all just saw that presentation at the last planning board meeting. The housing production plan, which I know MAPC produced for the city of Quincy a couple of years ago. And then also, as an example, the Wollaston Urban Revitalization District, which is the urban renewal plan that I think you've all been somewhat part of over the past couple of months. So those are just some examples of the way that these things all sort of work together and hopefully complement each other as much as possible. And they're all reviewed as part of the development process for this open space recreation plan. In addition to that, the state has its own statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. It's called the SCORP. They also have to update it every 5 years, and so they've most recently published it in 2023. It is a wonderful document to understand what the initiatives are for the Division of Conservation Services and where they're really planning to put their funding going forward. And in this cycle, they've focused especially on public access to water, trail systems, and connecting neighborhoods, and especially in underserved areas. So those are the high point goals. And I'll go through a couple of other state initiatives. Please do consider going on resilientmassachusetts.com or something like that, where you can access all these plans, download them, and take a look. They're not very, very heavy reading. The stuff behind it is. So it's really meant to be digested by anybody in the public. So in addition to the SCORP, the Commonwealth has produced what they're calling the Resilient Lands Initiative, and that is an effort to really specifically focus on natural resources. And that is a focus not only on natural resources in terms of land use and waterway protection, but also for how we are working with nature going forward. So the focus on the green economy and carbon storage and climate resilience are for the first time incorporated in a Commonwealth plan. And they're incorporated by way of this Resilient Lands Initiative. And then finally, the Resilient Massachusetts Plan is the Massachusetts State Hazard Mitigation and Climate Adaptation Plan, and that's called the Resilient Mass Plan. And that is where your local hazard mitigation plan is aimed to echo and communicate with the state planning exercise. And then as a bonus, under Resilient Lands, Massachusetts just published this really wonderful document called the Healthy Soils Action Plan, where they're looking at opportunities to regenerate existing soil locations for better climate resilience and carbon sequestration by way of building forests. So there's some really cool stuff going on at the state level. We want to make sure that we're echoing that at the city level so you don't miss out on the opportunity to apply for those grants because they're not in your open space and recreation plan, right? We want to make sure you're pointing at it too. With that, I will happily answer questions. Thank you for your time and attention tonight. I really, really appreciate it. There will be more to come. It's a great project and I'm delighted to be a part of it. You're welcome.
Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
No, I just, Adrian,
Yes.
if you go back to the existing environment, the open space, the map,
Yes.
title City of Quincy, open space by ownership. It's kind of small, so it's difficult
Very
to see.
small. Yeah.
But if you look at Moon Island, it's not identified as being Boston's, and this is identified as being Quincy with the green color, I think. that's actually, like, we can't go out, so.
Ownership municipal, it may not be a separate, they may not have identified City of Boston separate from,
No, I think Moon Island is the city of Quincy. The city of Boston owns the island.
oh, but Moon Island
But
holds
it's
fee ownership?
It's incorporated part of the city of Quincy. Long Island is the city of Boston.
Right,
Yeah.
so where the green is there, on the map,
Mhm.
right, that map doesn't have the green.
Oh, I'm
See-
sorry,
see-
I gotta
see
go all the
where
way
Long
back.
Island is, the map that we have has the green.
Oh, there it is,
There
yeah.
it is, so that map there is showing the green to me, because it's open space, so we own it, but we can't go out to it, that's what that comes out.
Yeah, it's protected, right?
Sure is.
Yeah.
You have no idea. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very, very good.
Any other questions?
No, I'm afraid to say no.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. This is great. Thank you.
Good, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's very good.
Yes, the fact, I love the fact that we have a plan of this caliber will open up funding, all different types of those.
Right.
At one point you said there's, applying for the state grants, executive office grants,
Mhm.
it means a lot if there's community input.
Yes,
Did I catch that?
yes,
So we have a lot of groups in Quincy that, whether it's the Tree Alliance, Quinn Cycles, we have multiple garden clubs,
yes,
the tour environmental treasures.
yeah.
So, is that measured in any way, like when we go to the state, can that be, of value be put upon that?
Well, I'll tell you what, in the context of the open space and recreation plan, we can include active, user groups. But the place where that really makes a huge difference now is in the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness 2.0 process, which specifically asks communities to go out, municipalities and build relationships that with all of those community-based organizations, nonprofits, user groups for a particular purpose. And typically the MVP plan itself is not updated, but the level of community engagement that's associated with action items ends up being updated. So you want those two to echo each other a little bit if you can.
That's great, because, as far as community involvement like that, I think our city hits it out of the park.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Murphy has a strong relationship with the few groups that I mentioned.
Yeah.
And there's many, many, many more.
Yeah,
So it's great to know that would translate into some of those state grants.
oh, absolutely,
Fantastic.
yes,
Thank you
yes.
very much.
You're welcome.
This is great.
Question.
Yeah.
So, the grants, we cannot apply for the grants until this plan is approved, is that correct?
It's approved in draft form, so
Okay.
you are currently eligible.
Okay,
However, you do have to finalize plan
right.
for it within the timeline.
And how long does that usually, because you mentioned a few different agencies that need to sign off on.
Oh, so well, the final approvals should go through pretty quickly at this point as we're moving forward with it. Developing an open space and recreation plan from the very beginning to the end is typically 18 to 24 months. It takes a long time to get through that whole reconciliation process to kind of get to final approvals. In this particular case, we got halfway through it and then now we're picking up the other half of it. So hopefully, we'll definitely ask the Division of Conservation Services for an extension on this plan because, it's aimed to expire in 2026 and you're
Right.
planning, if it takes 18 to 24 months to really develop a plan, then we're back at it again, but not really with necessarily new information. The census data just came out in 2020 and a lot of the activity and development in open space and recreation in Quincy has sort of taken place already in the last couple of years because of that capital improvement plan. So we'll make the argument and we'll see where it goes.
Which they're likely to extend, I mean, it's.
I have no idea.
You would think.
I
Logically
cannot
speaking, you would
speak.
hope, right?
I do not know what they will
Right,
say,
right.
but they are pragmatists and they do want to see you apply for these grants, right?
Right.
They want you to continue to be eligible. That's what they want to see because they don't go through all of these planning exercises at the state, at the state level to then say, oh, but not for you,
Sure.
right? So,
Right.
you have that going for you for sure.
When you're going through goal one, you mentioned however many various projects, I was checking next to just how many projects the city has completed already. It's
Yeah.
amazing,
It is so much.
just the effort that.
Right.
is put in. So,
Right.
that's all, thank you.
Go ahead. Next.
So as you were listing all those projects, are all those projects, those are all funded and approved? All
Not
the basketball
necessarily. So this is part of the accounting of, what was in the capital improvement plan, what's been completed from the capital improvement plan, what wasn't necessarily in the capital improvement plan but had to be done anyways because of this huge change in usership. And then what was still in the plan, what was in that draft plan under those goals and objectives that we didn't even get to touch because there was so much effort on the forefront to sort of do what was right in front of you at that moment when we were really executing the capital improvement monies.
And there's still grant money out there that we could capture to get
Yes.
some of those basketball courts
Yes.
approved.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely, yeah. And keeping them on the list is the most important part, right? Is making sure that, we're able to say, we've done all of this and we have more to do. And these are the things that still remain as priorities. Let's get them done.
I know they just did LeBret Park over and it's very, very nice.
Yeah. Quincy's parks are looking very, very nice. They are.
So I have a question. The launcher, I think you said you're launching a survey. So what does that entail?
Yeah, great question. So the survey actually is in collaboration with the hazard mitigation plan. It's about 25 questions long, so, settled in for it. The first series of questions are, what ward are you living in? And specific to that ward, do you have a special neighborhood park, playground, or open space area that you like to recreate in? And you select a couple of those. And then you go through and identify citywide what your favorite parks and recreation areas are. And then you talk more about activities and identify, what activities you're actually taking, how you're using parks and open spaces in the community and how you would like to use them going forward in the future. And then we move into what are the goals and action items? How would you prioritize those goals and action items? Are there other things that we need to try to incorporate going forward in the future? And then it pivots towards more of a discussion around climate change and what are the climate risks that we're concerned about, and that's sort of the hazard mitigation portion of it. What are the resource areas and also infrastructure, buildings, services that you're concerned about losing in the event of a natural disaster? What do you think is most important to protect to try to prevent that and build resilience in the community? And then there are a series of demographic questions at the end.
And how do we access that? Is it on the planning website or is it?
Good, yeah. So I'll jump up, Rob Stevens. Thank you,
Yeah, you're
Adrian.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Adrian's done a really great job with the plan update. So it was sort of the end of the last calendar year, beginning of this year. We needed to do public outreach, and we talked about going to the survey, and that's when we fired off on the hazard mitigation, and I see the crossover of the open spaces and then looking at our coastline and the impacts of climate change. So we paused and worked. I had the two consultant teams work together to develop some of those questions. And then, the planning department also has been entrusted with some of the language assistance funding. So we worked with our third-party translator to translate these surveys. We did our internal check on them. And then there was some back and forth, just making sure, just one thing on the translation, there is some elements that get, vocabulary that get lost in translation. As an example, we picked up on one translation of plans as paintings. So we wanted to, be sure on that translation. That took a little bit extra time, working with our community partners. And I think earlier this week, we got delivered from the BSC IT team all the surveys electronically. So the planning department is now currently working with the parks, with our IT, and I think very shortly, within a week, you're going to start to see this survey coming out. I would ask you, anyone that's at home listening to this, we want to try to amplify it. I think you'll see a lot of social media this time around. Thinking of some of the Facebook pages for the city, I think that's going to really amplify the survey. As Adrian said, it's got a lot of important questions. It'll take you, about 15 or 20 minutes. But that's really important data that this team will use as well as the hazard mitigation team will use. So is that helpful?
That's great,
So
yes.
we were trying hard to get it here ready, for tonight, but just just off. You should see a lot of it, I said, probably next week, the communications coming out.
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
So thank you.
Any other questions?
Any
I'm
more
happy to answer.
No?
No, okay.
questions? I would say one more point. Adrian did a great job capturing the timeline and how COVID affected that, right? So as we sit here with 2 years left on what we thought was going to be the 7-year run, and then the hazard mitigation plan is a federal plan, it's on a 5-year cycle. I know we have the option to go 7 years, but I've asked Adrian to maybe pose this to the state. What if we turn this into a 5-year plan from now? We match it with the cycle and the hazard mitigation, so we update both again in 5 years. And from there, maybe we go 7 years with open space again and go off, but I think the communication with the community, it's helpful that both planning initiatives can get the same feedback. Because it is difficult, to get out and try to reach everybody. And, with the enhanced public outreach with interpretation and translation, we're doing it, but there is logistics to that. So hopefully the state will see,
We'll see.
that
Mhm.
we
We will
are
ask,
working
for
it here
sure.
in Quincy, and
Yeah.
we're a coastal community, and that it probably makes sense to let us line up, these plans, at least for the next cycle. So that'll be the hope. I think when the full plan comes out in a month or two for approval, hopefully we'll have that answer, and you'll see.
We'll really
Hopefully we're
know.
successful.
Forgive me if I missed this. How long is the survey going to be open for?
About a month.
Okay.
So the idea is we'll try to get a meeting with the Park and Rec Board in May and want to maybe one more chance to amplify that survey. And then soon thereafter, sort of end of May, we'll close it down. Adrian's team will crunch the numbers and those will appear in the final report. I'll also shoot, survey results over to the hazard mitigation team as well.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all
Thank
for
you
your
very
time
much.
tonight again.
Yeah,
It's
very
great,
interesting.
and if you have any reason you need to reach me, of course, reach out through Rob. I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You don't get it much.
Thank you.
And if I'm busy, I do want to acknowledge my coworkers, Joanna, Chrissy, and Joe. They've been real helpful on this planning initiative, and it's been a real team effort, and we've had a good time with it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that's it. That concludes our.
Well, we do have the one
something
business item. It's just simply an A&R plan
Yeah.
has been in, so we just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And that would be it.
Okay.
Great.
I think that's it.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you.